All right, ladies and gentlemen, you are locked on Falcons. I'm your host, Aaron Freeman. And today I will be joined by the Ringers, Ben Solak. He's going to give his thoughts on the Falcons 2022 draft class and whether a quarterback like Desmond Ridder, who has mobility, is the key to attacking modern NFL defenses.
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
So, guys, you know me. I'm Aaron Freeman. Been covering the Falcons for many years, formerly at falcfans.com. RIP. Still going strong on Twitter at falcfans. And, of course, the host of this preeminent Locked On Falcons podcast, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast, part of the Locked On Sports Atlanta podcast family. And I want to thank everyone that makes Locked On Falcons their first listen each and every day. Locked On Falcons, like all the Locked On Sports Atlanta podcasts, including A to Z with Mark Zeno, ATL Day Ones with Jarvis Davis and Tanitra Batiste, Hitting Hard with John Chuckery, Locked On Hawks, Locked On Bulldogs, Locked On Braves. Free and available Monday through Friday on a variety of podcast platforms, including Apple, Odyssey, Google, Spotify, as well as on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to the Locked On Falcons YouTube channel, and you'll get the video version of the podcast the night before the audio drops. So today's episode features my guest, Ben Solak of The Ringer, formerly of the Locked On NFL Draft podcast. And Ben's going to talk with us about Drake London as we continue Locked On Drake London week. He'll talk with us about his thoughts on Desmond Ridder and sort of how quarterback mobility figures into attacking modern NFL defenses as the NFL shifts to a different style of defense. We'll get into that with Ben, and we'll get his thoughts on some of the other standouts in the Falcons draft class, including Arnold Ebiketie. But before we jump into that conversation with Ben, I do want to remind you that as part of Locked On Drake London week, this week will be culminating on Sunday evening here on Locked On Falcons YouTube channel with the comprehensive breakdown of Drake London. Don't want to miss it. Obviously, if you're only an audio listener to the podcast, you'll get that Monday morning. So you definitely want to tune that out. But obviously, tomorrow we will be doing a Locked On Falcons schedule release recap. And for those of you guys out there that are in the Atlanta area and, regularly tune in to 11 Alive, you probably will see me Thursday evening after 8 p.m. Helping break down the schedule on that channel. So definitely tune in for, you local Atlanta natives. So without further ado, getting all the plugs out of the way, let's jump into the conversation with Ben Solak right now. All right, guys, you are Locked On Falcons, and I am joined by another illustrious guest. That is, of course, Ben Solak of The Ringer. Ben is here to talk with us a little bit more about this Falcons draft class, get some additional thoughts on it, revisiting the old Locked On NFL draft days. Had Trevor Sikkema on last week.
Sir.
Got to get the second half of that with Ben. But Ben, welcome back to Locked On Falcons.
Thanks, man. Didn't realize you had Trev on. The pressure's on. I gotta perform.
All right. I think you'll live up to that. But we've been doing a whole lot of Drake London stuff all week long here on Locked On Falcons. And so I want to get your thoughts on Drake London. And pretty much everybody I've talked to over the last couple of weeks, I sort of asked them this question. I want to kind of pick your brain on this as well. Do you see Drake London as as a big slot receiver, sort of in the mold of Michael Thomas, or do you see him as a guy that's going to thrive on the outside?
I think he can do both. I think that's one of the reasons why he was a top 10 pick, right? The contested catch receiver that comes out of college with largely winning balls at the catch point usually doesn't get drafted that highly and has struggled as a prototype over the last couple of years. You think about JJ, think of Whiteside coming out, think about N'Keal Harry coming out. In the same vein, the big slot prototype, which has had more success in the league, is not a position that you have seen be super highly drafted, right? Michael Thomas is one of the earlier examples. Cooper Kupp is a third-round pick, and obviously the league leader in receiving yards last year. As another good example, he was a late selection. If you have a guy who can do both, now that seems more valuable. And I think that's what you have in a player like Drake London, where London is an impressive contested catch player. But as was talked about a lot during the pre-draft process, he wasn't only contested catch. He was often forced into contested catch because of the quarterback play that was around him when he had the ability to catch the ball in stride, when he had the ability to catch the ball in a breaking route, moving horizontal across the field instead of vertical and having to elevate for that ball. He was a weirdly good yak player for being a 6'3", 6'4" guy, right? And so I think you have a player in London that you expect to be able to do a little bit of both. He might end up much better at one than the other, and then you put him into that role. And even if he's not like, dominating like other top 10 picks at receiver, he still hit for you. So he's a high floor player in London because he has a wide variety of skills, especially for his build. And so to me, he's some of both, and I expect him to be used as such by Atlanta.
Now, one of the things I remember you talking about earlier this offseason with the folks at the Ringer were concerns about whether or not London had that sort of top end speed. He never got an opportunity to run this offseason.
He had an opportunity. It didn't, which is good work by him. I appreciate that. It's well done.
So I'm curious, how much of a factor is that? Because the league is so much moving towards this. We got to be more explosive. Obviously, he has that ability to win, play above the rim, win on those fade balls, win on those 50-50 balls. But does that sort of concern you a little bit that maybe he's a little bit more of a possession type of receiver than necessarily this guy that's going to be a big time explosive playmaker? Or do you feel like he has the skill set to be more of that big time playmaker?
So I do think he can be a big playmaker because I think he has the ability to break tackles, right? And if we're getting him the ball in the second to third level, then oftentimes it's only breaking one tackle that leads to an explosive play, right? That's why, like, when we talk about players who are really good yards after the catch in the modern NFL, we're talking about Deebo Samuel, A.J. Brown, Jamar Chase, who get their targets downfield, right? Historically, when we've talked about good yak performers, those have been underneath players, Golden Tate, right? Oh, breaking tackles, crazy, movement skills, tough. He's getting a 5-yard stick route. Debo's getting a 10-yard crosser. Brown's getting a 12-yard dig, right? Jamar Chase getting a 20-yard, like 9-ball, and then he's somehow able to create after the catch from that. And so you still get the screens as well, but these guys can create after the catch and they can do it downfield. And once you break one tackle downfield, nobody left, right? And you have the ability to create an explosive. With that said, even when London breaks that tackle, there's the potential that he gets caught from behind more frequently than a guy like Deebo, who's got unbelievable explosiveness, Jamar Chase, who's got great explosiveness and long speed, right? And so when we say explosive, I hear pass play over 20 yards, right? That's the typical coach kind of cutoff bucket for an explosive pass play. London can get those. He can get those, I think, at a high level. I think that's why he was a top 10 pick. That's why I like him as a wide receiver 1. And we're talking 40-plus yard touchdowns, right? Think about the Jamar Chase catch and run touchdown against whoever they played in week 16. I think it was the Browns. Think about the Deebo Samuel catch and run touchdown he had against the Bears right in the middle of the season. You're not getting those from London. I would be surprised because I think the long speed is prohibitive. I think people will catch up to him, drag him, force him out of bounds, yada, yada. But if we're just saying explosive pass play rate as 20-plus yard catch, London's got the skill set for me to get those done because he can catch that ball with 20 yards of air yards, win the contested catch, win the downfield body positioning. And he can also take a 10, 12-yard dig, right? That basic, that crosser, and make that into a 20-yard gain by breaking the first tackle. So I expect high explosive plays from Drake London. It's just, I don't think they'll come with him running away and turning those 25-yard gains into 50, 75-yard touchdowns.
Fair enough. Now, we just finished talking about explosive plays, and one of the things and ways that NFL teams are trying to prevent teams from generating those explosive plays is playing a lot more split safety looks and middle of the field coverages. And I want to move the conversation forward here with Ben Solak, talking about how sort of quarterback mobility factors into that style of defense, as well as what the Falcons got in their 3rd round draft pick in quarterback Desmond Ridder, as we continue today's Locked On Falcons podcast. So obviously we got more to come on today's Locked On Falcons podcast. But before we get there, guys, I do want to let you know about the Locked On Sports Atlanta podcast family. As I plugged at the top of the show, you got 3 different shows with 4 different personalities and 4 different perspectives on all of Atlanta sports, all on the same feed. A to Z with Mark Zinno, Hitting Hard with John Chuckery, and ATL Day Ones with Jarvis Davis and Tanitra Batiste. Find them all on the Locked On Sports Atlanta podcast feed on your preferred podcast platform, as well as on YouTube. And guys, I also want to tell you that today's episode of Locked On Falcons is brought to you by Rock Auto. With ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts that you need. Why wait while the person behind the counter orders parts on their computer when you already have a computer with access to rockauto.com at home or in your pocket? Save time and money when using Rock Auto instead of spending up twice as much for the same parts from a chain store or car dealership. Rock Auto is a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years and have reliably low prices for every single customer. They have everything you need from brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil, even new carpet. Just head on over to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. It's an easy to use website. And when you do, make sure you write Locked On in the How Did You Hear About Us box so that they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. So I'm here with Ben Solak of The Ringer, and we're talking about, this Falcons draft class. And one of the things that, you've written and done videos on this, Ben, I thought you've done a lot of really good work sort of introducing, I guess, the layman football fan into this sort of concept of this Fangio style and Brandon Staley style of defense that plays a lot of middle of the field open coverages or split safety stuff, a lot of cover 2, cover 4, that sort of thing, as a way of slowing down the explosiveness in NFL offenses today. And I guess my question for you is, given that we're moving away from this sort of Seahawk style of defense with the cover 1 and cover 3 stuff to more of this cover 2, cover 4 stuff, does having a mobile quarterback become more important for the future of the NFL to basically break teams? Is that going to be a bigger problem for some of these split safety defenses to play when they have a quarterback that can run with the football, because you're not putting as many defenders close to the line of scrimmage to keep an eye on that guy?
Quarterback running is going to cause problems, like, period. Right. So we start there, right? I get to play 11 on 11 versus 10 on 11. I don't care where you put in safeties. I don't care how deep they are. And everything else after that, fundamentally, once I get to play 11 on 11, because I have a Lamar Jackson, because I have a Josh Allen, because I have a Kyler Murray and even a Jalen Hurts, that helps me. That's to my advantage, right? And we should keep Hurts and Murray right now in our pocket as important examples as how this works here. But let's focus right now on Lamar and Josh Allen. Firstly, design quarterback run, right? If I can get that numerical advantage on 1st and 10 when I'm designing quarterback run, right? You watch the Bills barely run any design quarterback run all season. Then they get to the offseason, they start throwing that thing. Or they start, I should say, throwing that pitch, which is running the football with the quarterback. If you say throwing that thing, I think I'm talking about throwing the football. That's confusing. So they start actually using design quarterback run. They wanted to protect Josh Allen. They don't want to get him hurt during a week 5 game, and they don't need to. So they run him in the postseason. And in doing so, they force you to change the way you fit the run. Because if you're fitting the run with 5 down offensive linemen and 1 running back, well, you got 6 gaps to deal with, 1 on each side of the 5 offensive linemen. So you got to get 6 guys in that box, 1 for each gap, and then 1 for each lineman, and then the extra 1 to go ahead and tackle that rusher, right? Once I introduce Josh Allen to the running game, a read option or design keeps or RPOs with a quarterback run tag, whatever, you now have to add an additional person. Because if you have 6, 1 for each lineman and then 1 for the running back, and the running back doesn't have the ball, you don't have 7. You didn't put him in the box, right? So now I'm starting to pull that extra player down. And like you've said, once I pull that extra player down into the box, most defenses historically have wanted to then respond by being middle of the field closed. Pull 1 safety into the box means I only have 1 safety deep. I got to put him in the middle of the field. That way I maximize his value. Well, Lamar with the Ravens used to rip up teams, right? And then they got to the playoffs and they discovered that teams started to run quarters against them. Quarters are middle of the field open. That's not middle of the field closed, right? And the reason why this worked is because when you go to add those players to the box, you can run what we call max fit quarters, right? Where those quarter safeties are not 2 deep safeties lined up 15 yards deep. Think about what you see from the Colts. Think about what you saw from the Eagles last year, right? That Matt Eberflus tree, 2 safeties all the way back. But in quarters, when we're fitting the run, we're going to put those safeties at 9 yards, and they're going to read run to pass, right? And both can get involved in the run fit if they see run action from the line, from the running back in the backfield. And so all of a sudden now I'm in the middle of the field open world. but I can get both those 2 additional players now involved in the run. So we should be firm in saying that it is not enough. It is not clear enough. It is not completely correct to say middle of the field open, you can't be there against quarterback run. You don't have enough numbers. You can. You just have to decide to make those safeties legitimately play the run. And when you do, now teams are going to look for the explosive play on top of you. Now teams are going to look to be what the Ravens tried to be, and they never really got this going, but they wanted to be this vertical passing team, seam routes, 9 balls, just throw over the top. You're going to play your safeties low. We're going to take one-on-ones all day long. And they just couldn't get that outside receiver to really win those one-on-ones to the level of consistency that they wanted to. So now we're going to get to the passing game, and we're going to have solutions. This brings us to Kyler Murray and Jalen Hurts, because Murray and Jalen Hurts both made the playoffs as rushing quarterbacks this year. And they both had nice success as dual threat guys. And they both, they played the Eagles in Hurts' case, and they played the Rams in Murray's case. And neither defense respected them. We weren't afraid of them because they were confident putting, two deep safeties, but bringing those safeties up and having them fit from quarters and telling those quarterbacks to beat them in the throwing game. Telling those quarterbacks, you don't throw enough to the middle of the field. So we're not going to cover it because we're not afraid of it. So we're going to be able to get eyes on your number 1 receiver. We're going to be able to play him tight into the sideline. And we don't think you can throw middle of the field and punish us. We're going to blitz, right? A great way to solve quarterback run, send pressure right now. Throw off the blocking scheme, right? Throw off the run blocking assignments. So we're going to send bodies. And we're going to expect you to pull the ball and make us pay for it. You have to punish us with your arm. And both of those quarterbacks struggle to do so in a playoff setting. And so what's the answer to your question? I don't know. It's all that, right? It's this large amorphous body of moving parts that's not difficult to just define into such rigid lines like middle of the field open, middle of the field closed, quarterback run or not quarterback run. Quarterback mobility is always going to help. It's going to give us an extra number in the design running game, and it's going to let us create after the initial play fails. But it's going to give us that second reaction improvisation ability. If you're really good at it, it's going to force defenses to really put their initial resources, like the Ravens with Lamar, into stopping that quarterback running game. But defenses are smart. They're talented. They have good players. If you don't have the solution, if you don't have the response to what they give you, they will not respect you and they will beat you just like anything else. So quarterback mobility is huge, but we're still figuring out what exactly it means for defenses, what exactly the solutions are, so on and so forth.
It's fair enough. I just sit here these last couple of years and look at a team that the Falcons play, twice a year, and the Saints that play a lot of cover 2 man. And I'm sitting here going, man, if the Falcons had a mobile quarterback, they could absolutely break that style of defense that the Saints want to play. And we'll sort of see if, that sort of allows us to pivot to Desmond Ridder and talking about him and what he's bringing to the table. Is Desmond Ridder, where did you have Desmond Ridder sort of ranked in this quarterback class?
Quarterback 1, good player.
Okay. And is that due to his high floor as a passer relative to some of the quarterbacks in this draft class? Or is it in a lot of ways the sort of the unique combination of both having that passing ability and that running ability when some of the other quarterbacks in this draft class, they were kind of skewing more towards one end of the spectrum?
So high floor, absolutely big part of it. It's just important to emphasize that does not imply like low ceiling. With Ridder, it's probably like mid ceiling, and mid ceiling, a part of that is the fact that he can really run, right? Like when he gets outside of the pocket, he can make the first guy miss with speed, right? With explosiveness. He's tall, long strides, right? So he eats up ground pretty quick. The high ceiling probably isn't there because the arm is good, not amazing. The accuracy is good. I don't think the accuracy is a problem, but it's obviously not amazing. He's a little bit risk prone when he shouldn't be risk prone, right? So that's going to lead to some bad explosive plays given up to the defense. But in general, high floor because he's a tremendous processor who has the ability to execute an NFL offense against NFL defenses right now. Has the accuracy, has the arm strength to make the punishing throws, can throw the outside hash stuff, he can throw the middle of the field stuff, tight window stuff. He has the ability to do all that. And then when he gets outside of the pocket, which pocket management isn't amazing right now, but when he gets outside of the pocket, he can make first player miss and he can go and pick up a tough 3rd and 6 for you. He'll put his head down, he'll go get it. And so in general, Ridder was quarterback 1. Not the sort of profile that you'd typically like be tripping over yourself to get top 10, but he was a first round pick in my book all the way through, and getting him 2 rounds later, as Ridder himself said, they waited too long, man. This was a surprising fall in my opinion. I think one the NFL will regret.
Okay. So that sounds like you have a generally positive outlook on Desmond Ridder here in Atlanta.
Yeah. This makes sense for him. I know many people gave him Mariota comparisons. I see those comparisons. I like those comparisons. I gave him Tannehill comparisons, which obviously we're talking about two quarterbacks that Arthur Smith used to coach, one that's now still in Atlanta, but most notably for me, the Tannehill comparison, a quarterback with whom he was very successful when he was in Tennessee. If Smith wants to live in the world he lived in Tennessee, where the quarterback is under center, where he is thrown middle of the field, where he is, using receivers as blockers. He is working to get yards after the catch in these crossing routes. He is throwing from inside of the pocket, right? It's not so much like outside zone and bootleg stuff, but he's going to throw from the pocket. He's going to have his quarterback to stand tall and take some hits. If all of that is true and he wants to be in that general world, Ridder can execute. And then I think Smith is a smarter coach than to just give Ridder the Tannehill blueprint and say, do exactly this. I think he's going to move him out of the pocket a little bit more. I think he's going to get him involved in a little more shotgun quick game because Ridder can do that in a way that will help your offense become more variable, help your offense kind of, disguise tendency a little bit. So if they want to live in that world that they lived in Tennessee, which you would imagine that's where Smith wants to start from, that's his base offense, that's what he's going to grow from here in Atlanta, Tannehill executes that. And frankly, he does better than Mariota. And I know that because Smith could have kept playing Mariota in this offense and chose not to. He put Tannehill in instead, right? And so they got Kyle Pitts when they never had a star tight end. They don't have their A.J. Brown. They're kind of Drake London, who's a little bit different. It may not be 1-to-1 to Tennessee, and accordingly, it may be Mariota early, and it may be better for Mariota at first. I think Ridder's a more talented player. I think Ridder's the healthier player, too. And so I would be surprised if Ridder doesn't get in year one, and I would be surprised if they don't have a clear plan for Ridder because he has the traits necessary to execute a system that Smith knows how to run and has had a lot of success running in the past.
Okay. And we will wrap up here with Ben Solak to talk a little bit more about the rest of the Falcons draft class, some players that he likes, maybe some players that he does not like. We'll pick his brain on that as we continue today's Locked On Falcons. So, guys, there's more to come here on Locked On Falcons, getting Ben Solak's thoughts on the rest of the Falcons draft class, who you liked, who you didn't like. But before we get there, guys, speaking of things you do or do not like, maybe you do or do not like putting money on sports. And if you do like that, the best place to go is betonline.net, the number one source for all your sports betting needs and info in terms of things that you don't like to lose. And betonline.net can give you the updates with the latest odds, props, player contests, and podcasts to help you out. And whether you like to bet on football and you have, win totals and Super Bowl winners for NFL future props, or baseball, NBA playoffs, NHL playoffs, boxing, UFC, golf, esports, Vegas casino games, all that and more available at the website. Head on over there today. Use your mobile device to sign up at betonline.net and learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. So, guys, wrapping up here with Ben Solak of Locked On Falcons. First, I want to thank everyone that makes Locked On Falcons their first listen each and every day. And of course, make sure you subscribe to Locked On Falcons on the variety of podcast platforms that is free and available on. And if you're looking forward to more insights into Drake London, of course, we're culminating this week on Sunday evening with a Drake London scouting report here on Locked On Falcons. But, talking about the rest of this Falcons draft class, sung praises of Drake London, you've sung the praises of Desmond Ridder. Any other players in this Falcons draft class that you're willing to sing the praises here on Locked On Falcons?
Yeah, I liked Ebiketie quite a bit. Penn State rusher, stand-up guy with twitch, right? Is going to be a 3-down player because of the motor, because of the violence. He's not going to be the best run defender you ever seen, but he has the ability to get to the quarterback on 1st and 10 because of the explosiveness, and then certainly on 3rd and long when he knows he can just tee off and go. Enough of a variety of pass rush moves that he should be effective in year one. You want to build on that in year 2, year 3, and you believe you can. He's a transfer with high athleticism. He's got a nice arc to continue to develop. So, like Ebiketie, like Tyler Allgeier a lot. Allgeier was another one where if you could just close your eyes and not think about the 40 time, he's the best player in the world, like Drake London, right? You're just kind of like, who needs to be fast in the NFL? It doesn't matter. Allgeier's impressive back in eyes, and impressive back in terms of his eyes, impressive back in terms of his explosiveness, his contact balance at his size. He's built like Nick Chubb. Like, it's impossible to watch him run that offense because at BYU under Jeff Grimes and Zach Wilson was there, they were running wide zone play action stuff the same way that Shanahan did in the NFL and what Kevin Stefanski was doing in Cleveland, it was impossible to not see Chubb, just in terms of how well he picked his spots, how well he bounced gap to gap, how he maintained momentum, how he maintained balance with this little bowling ball frame, right? 5'10", 215. Right? It looked exactly like Chubb. And then you get to the third level and you'd be like, oh, right, that's why Nick Chubb's a star. Because Nick Chubb could then go and hit the Nas in a way that Tyler Allgeier and most backs of that size just can't. And so that's why you're getting a 5th round pick instead of, an early 2nd round pick. But Allgeier has that to him where in terms of an early down grinder, you love what CPAT did last year as a running back, but you're probably not hanging your hat on that just because that was new. And so you want to get a little bit of insurance, and I think Allgeier represents that. So I wouldn't be surprised if Allgeier gets himself into decently significant touches, 8 to 10 touches at some point this season, because I think he's a reliable running back who, if it's blocked up well in front of him, will get what he's supposed to get, won't make mistakes, and then has the ability to survive some tough contact, pick up some dirty yards. So liked those 2 picks quite a bit.
Any picks that you were scratching your head a little bit with?
No, I mean, like, scratching my head, no, because when they took Troy Andersen, it's like, yeah, of course the Falcons freaking took Troy Andersen. Like, that they have historically, this is obviously under Dimitrov, but they have historically been in on taking those really crazy athletes. Right? I think about John Kaminsky, and just kind of saying, oh, we'll figure out what this guy can do on the fly. And so Andersen felt like a Falcons pick. I would not have been tripping over myself to take Troy Andersen at 58, simply because I didn't love the film. I think that there's so much rawness there. There's so much work that needs to be done. But with that said, when you are a team that has simply very little momentum right now entering the season, you
Appreciate the very generous way you phrased that.
Yeah, you let some star talent leave the building last year, and then one of the few remaining star talents you have can't play this season, and it's just tough scene for Atlanta in general. You have a long arc, so why not spend 58 on a pick for a pick on a guy who simply will not show up next year? We just do not get linebackers this tall, this big, this fast with this change of direction in every draft class. So if you're going to probably be bad for a couple years, because the Falcons are probably going to be bad for a couple years, go ahead and get that guy and see if you can make something out of him. Because if he misses, oh shucks, it doesn't really matter that much for you in your short-term win-loss column. If he hits, it does matter for you a lot in your long-term win-loss column. So I wouldn't have made the pick, but I get the pick.
Okay. Well, Ben, I appreciate you joining me, talking Falcons 2022 draft. I'm looking forward to, your 2023 draft takes. I'm sure you're going to be waist deep in CJ Stroud, Bryce Young, Will Levis, Tyler Van Dyke arguments all summer long. So I look forward for looking from afar at that conversation, but let the people know, what's coming on the Ringer from you and where people can find your stuff.
Absolutely, yeah. So Ringer NFL Show, Ringer NFL Gambling Show is where all my in-season content is, and so you should subscribe to those. I'm on Twitter at Benjamin Solak. That's where all my written stuff goes. And yeah, we're doing off-season stuff. We're doing final questions. We're doing Jimmy and Baker futures. We're doing schedule release. We're doing all the good nuggets of NFL May existence, and making this sport last for 12 months. So that's where all my stuff is.
Okay. Guys, appreciate you tuning in for another episode of Locked On Falcons. I want to thank Ben once more for joining me and completing the Locked On NFL draft set. I already had John Ledyard on as well earlier this offseason, so I'm just
that's a full gamut right there.
Yeah, so you know how I'm doing that. But yeah, man, really do appreciate you coming back on, and look forward to future conversations as we get a little bit maybe closer to the season.
Sweet. Appreciate you, Aaron. Have a good one, man.
So, guys, that's going to do it for us here on today's episode. As I said at the top of the show, tomorrow will be all about the schedule, and breaking down sort of, I know we're more positive here on today's all week long on these Locked On Falcons episodes, but it's not going to be pretty. When I think a lot of people are going to be, realizing, oh, this schedule is a lot tougher than I thought. But one of the key things before we duck out of here on today's episode that we'll be paying attention to and probably focusing quite a bit on tomorrow's episode when we break down the schedule is when that bye week is. When is that time where the Falcons could potentially make the switch to Desmond Ridder, and the bye week is a perfect opportunity for that, right before the bye week, right after the bye week, whatever the case may be. So that's something that we'll be talking about. So eager to see where that falls for the Falcons. But guys, that's going to do it for us here on today's episode. Again, we're continuing Locked On Drake London Week, culminating on Sunday evening. Make sure it's appointment television for you on Sunday evening to check out the comprehensive scouting report. All this information you've heard of Drake London over the last several weeks. We boil it down probably in one 45-minute episode, if I'm being honest, breaking down all his strengths, weaknesses, his NFL comparisons, what his ceiling is going to be in the NFL, what his floor is going to be in the NFL, all that and more on Sunday evening. So make sure you subscribe to the Locked On Falcons YouTube channel to get that Sunday evening, or subscribe to Locked On Falcons on your preferred audio podcast platform so that you can catch it Monday morning when you're commuting to work or dropping the kids off at school or whatever the case may be. So that will wrap up Locked On Drake London Week on Sunday. Schedule release tomorrow. If you have any feedback that you want to provide me on anything that's been discussed on today's episodes, previous episodes, or you want to discuss on future episodes, by all means, you can hit me up on Twitter at Locked On Falcons, Facebook at Locked On Falcons, send an email to lockedonfalcons@mail.com, or you can leave a comment here on the Locked On Falcons YouTube channel. Guys, I appreciate it. Make sure you check out Locked On NFL if you want to stay tuned to all the other things going on around the NFL as your second listen after you've tuned into today's Locked On Falcons. And of course, they're covering all 32 teams, including the Falcons, and all 32 teams, different angles, news, and breaking news and all that sort of stuff. So check that out on your preferred podcast platform as well, including on YouTube. Appreciate it. Till then.